day of the month of Kislev, and we are holding towards the top of Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph in our final Daf of the sixth parak of Maseches Pesachim. The Gemara continues discussing the din of the Mishnah. Shachatu shaloi la'ichlav. If one shechted the Korban Pesach without with having in mind that you are shechting it for people that are not going to be eating it. I mean, somebody that's too old, somebody that is too weak, too sick, they're not going to be able to eat the Korban Pesach. In such a case, that is the consideration that the Mishnah is discussing with us, that both Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer had agreed to was going to be problematic. Okay, says the Mishnah, says the Gemara as follows: Shachatu shalayla achlav, if you shechted it, having in mind somebody that is not going to be eating, or people completely that aren't going to be eating it, not because later on the Mishnah is going to tell us if you did it for people that can eat it and people that cannot eat it, that's going to be okay. Says the Gemara challenging this pshita. Obviously, if you shechted it shalayla achlav, you'd be chayev on Shabbos for doing so because it's not a good korban. Kevin the Hasan puzzle, since it's taught there, meaning from Daf Samach Aleph, that this is possible. Obviously, here you'd be chayiv. Meaning, there we were talking about the psulim of the korban. If it's possible, obviously you'd be chayiv for shechting on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, no, mishum detana sefer potter. Since the end of the line of the Mishnah is that if you did it la'achlav you'd be potter. So Tana Reisha Chayiv. That's why the Reisha is going to tell me that I am Chayiv, and therefore it's going to include that din as well. Says the Gemara. Hold on, let's just share the link here. Give me just a moment. Says the Gemara continuing as follows. Okay, good. So you've just told me that we want to make sure that you can teach the din of la'achlav is going to be a potter. Says the Gemara v'hanami pshita. That's also obvious. Mishum the hasam kosher. Since we already told there that it's kosher, hacha potter. Yeah, you'd be potter. Says the Gemara no. Since we're teaching about the case of shechting and shalol lishma on Shabbos, since we spoke about shalol lishma, shechting it not for its sake, not as a Korban Pesach, we're also teaching about shalol lachlav. Says the Gemara, why do you even need to teach me this din? We know all of these halachas, meaning anything that would be possible, you'd be chayav for doing on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, mishum de kabai leiflugi. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua. Since we want to introduce the machlokes of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, with which we've discussed in the last 2-3 shiurim, so that machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, that's why we go through the preamble here. So we reviewed the halachas, and then we taught the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, the case of Toya, according to Rabbi Yeshua. Amalei Rav Huna Bar China Librei says Rav Huna Bar China to his son. Ki azlos lekamad Rabbi Zrika. When you go in front of Rabbi Zrika, I have a shaila that you need to ask him. L'divrei Omer mekalkel b'chabura. Potter. According to the shita that says that a person that made a chabura on Shabbos, you made a wound on Shabbos, b'der kilku means mekalkel b'chabura means that you wounded an animal and you did nothing good for that animal. You poked a hole in an animal. Now it's bleeding, but for no constructive purpose. It wasn't surgery, and it wasn't shchita, and it wasn't nothing. You just hurt an animal on Shabbos, meaning mekalkel bechabura. You made a chabura with an animal, but you did nothing good. Potter, you'd be potter in such a case. That's the din of mekalkel bechabura. Now we have a question. If you shechted it shalol la'ochlav, you shechted this animal shalol la'ochlav without anybody that's going to be eating it. Chayev. The Mishnah here says chayev. Matiket. Why would you be chayev there? Meaning you'd be chayev ostensibly for shchita, but shchita without any purpose of it. You've been sheikhed this animal, but now this animal, what are you going to do with it? Nobody can eat it. Nobody's fulfilled the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. You simply killed an animal for no purpose. That's called kilkul. You destroyed an animal. So that, according to the opinion that says that mekalkel b'chabur is potter, why does our Mishnah say that you chayv? How would we understand that? So apparently, Reb Zrika explained as follows: Tikkun im alu lo yerdu. Yeah, there is a tikkun here still. Is that if before they figured out that there was nobody eating this, im alu, if they took the emurim up to the top of the mizbech, lo yerdu, you don't bring them down, meaning they still get burnt to the top of the mizbech. That's the din. Anything that is taken up to the top of the mizbech needs to be burnt there. Rashi points out, all of the korbanos have become puzzled in the azara. The Gemara says, Zvachim Peidal and Aleph, im alul mizbech emurihem la'aktir lo yerdu. If they go up to the mizbech, they don't come down, meaning they'd still be offered on the mizbech. It's true that you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, and you'd be chayiv on Shabbos, because what you did here did actually put something on the mizbech, and that would be a tikkun, meaning you've upgraded this animal from walking around to being a korban, at least in some way. Now we've challenged a little bit further. Shachtav an imsa bal mum. If you shechted it and you found out that it was a bal mum, so chayiv. In that case, you'd be chayiv. My ticket. What did you fix there? How are you chayiv on Shabbos? Says the Gemara, ticket bedukin sheba'ayin ve'aliba de Rabbi Akiva the Amar im alu lo yerdu. So the ticket here would be if the mummin that we were speaking about are bidukin in the eye of the animal, it's a cataract in the eye of the animal, so that is a mum. According to Rabbi Akiva, we still hold im alu lo yerdu, because that balmum is only applicable to a behema. It wouldn't be applicable to an oif. And Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that any mum that is only applicable to a behema, not to an oif, you still have the din im alu lo yerdu. Okay, so these emurim would still be burnt in the mizbech. Shachtav an imtza treifa b'seisa. What happens if you shechted it and then you found out that it was a treifa? Meaning you open it up, you check the lungs, and the way that they check that we check the lungs today, the days of the Mikdash as well, to be able to check the lungs of the animal, you check to make sure that they're smooth, and you make sure that there's no sirchus. So they blow it up, they blow up the lungs, and you put it in a bucket of water and see if there's any bubbles that come out. You realize, oh my gosh, this had a hole in its lungs, it would never have survived. It's a treifa. So in such a case, potter. There you potter. So we say ha begilu. Yeah, that obviously means the beseser potter. The reason that you are potter is that it is beseser, that you couldn't have known it beforehand. Ha begilu. But if it would have been obvious that the animal would have been bleeding out before, it would be a treifa. Chayev. There you'd be chayev. My ticket. What did you fix? What was the thing that you fixed that you'd be chayev here on Shabbos? Says the Gemara, ticket lahotzi midei nevela. You made it and not nevela. Meaning, once you shechted an animal, it is no longer nevela. You can't eat it anyway. What's the big deal? Rashi points out in mila tame, because a nevela causes tumah. Nevela is tame, but a treifa is not tame. So once you shechted it, you've made it not a nevela. It is now a treifa, but it doesn't cause tumah. Maseches Ravina challenged not what we said now, but challenged similarly on a different din. Maseches Ravina asked the following question: Had the Tanya, that which we taught in a braysa, hashechet chatas b'Shabbos, person that shechted a chatas on Shabbos, b'chutz outside of the Beis Hamikdash, la'avodah zara for avodah zara, meaning they were makriv of an animal to avodah zara as a chatas, and it was outside of the Beis Hamikdash, meaning three really bad things. Over Shabbos, you violated Shabbos. You brought a korban outside of the Beis Hamikdash, and you did it for avodah zara. So you did all of these three things. Says the word chayiv aleh gimel chatos. You be chayiv three chatos, three sin offerings for this. Meaning, assuming that you did this unintentionally, which is hard to imagine. Okay, but Rashi points out that mishum Shabbos, mishum avodah zara, mishum shchutei chutz la'azara. You violated three things, right? Accidentally avodah zara, accidentally shchutei chutz, shechted outside of the Beis Hamikdash, and accidentally on Shabbos. Very busy day. Says the Gemara, my ticket. This is Ravina's kasha. My ticket. What did you fix here? What did you fix? Meaning, why should he have to bring a korban for violating Shabbos? What's the kasha here? Is that as opposed to if you shechted a korban that was a treifa, so you saved it from being an avela. Here, even if it's not an avela, it's a treifa, it still is going to be tummy because tikrovus avodah zarah is tummy. The avodah zarah is going to make it tummy, and therefore you haven't saved it from tumah. So there's nothing that you've been metakin. Amar Rav Avira says, Ravira, yeah, there is something to be metakin, and that is shematzir midei every menachai, that you have rescued it from the possible isra of every menachai. If a non-Jew were to come and eat this, he would not violate it every menachai, and therefore it's still a tikkun. Meaning, tikkun on Shabbos means that you fixed it up to some extent that it is now better than if it would just be a dead animal. And in such a case, yeah, you've done something. You've done something. Now a non-Jew can come and enjoy this without any concern of every melachai. Okay. And now we're going to quote the next line of the Mishnah and then discuss not anything related to this line of the Mishnah, at least not yet. It says the Mishnah as follows: Shachtai v'noida. If you shechted it, then you found out that it was a treifa. So in that case, it was potter. So Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says as follows: Amar Rav in the name of Rav. Asham shenitak l'riyah. If you have a korban asham, so a little bit of background here. If you have a korban asham that a person wanted to bring a korban asham, and they dedicated an animal as a korban asham, and then they lost that animal, they don't know where it went. Right? Mary they had a little lamb, but disappeared. Found another little lamb. Decided, okay, I'm going to make this one an asham. On your way back from the Beis Hamikdash, you're like, oh my gosh, there's my asham. I found it. What do you do with that first asham that you dedicated as an asham? So in such a case, it's machlokes tanaim, but we'll see it a little bit. But in that case, this is an asham shenitak l'riyah, meaning it is nitak, meaning it's disconnected, l'riyah, and it's sent off to pasture. It's put out to pasture, literally. Yeah, you don't just let it graze. Machlokes, whether you let it graze until it develops a mum, or you let it graze until it dies. According to Rabbi Yeshua, you let it graze until it develops a mum, and then you're going to sell this animal. And once you've sold this animal, you're going to take that money and you are going to dedicate the money to the Beis Hamikdash to be used as an oila, as a korban oila. And that korban oila is not a korban oila for an individual, and it's not a korban oila that is mechuyev. It is a korban oila that is extra korbanos for the mizbech. Whenever the mizbech is sitting idle, they would bring out those olas and they would put them on the mizbech so that the mizbech didn't look like anybody was bringing anything on it. It was covered for the mizbech. And that was what was done with that money. Okay. Keeping that in mind, this asham is going to become a ola at some point in time. Or at least the money of this asham is going to become an ola. So, says in the name of Rav, asham shenitak l'riyah. You have a korban asham that was put out to pasture. V'shachtai stam. And then some fellow came along and, or the owner, v'shachtai stam, and shechted it without thinking about anything. Yeah, he didn't think about anything. You didn't think I'm making an asham, you didn't think I'm making an oila. What do? Kosher, la'oila. You shechted it, stam, it is now going to be kosher for an oila. This animal, it hasn't developed a mum yet, it's kosher as an oila. What does that imply? That seems to indicate that you don't specifically need akira. You don't need to undo the ashamness. You don't need to say this is no longer asham. It defaults to ola. It doesn't need akira in order to become an ola. Says the Gemara, if this is so, so even if it wouldn't be put out to pasture, then it would also be good as an ola. Meaning, if you just shechted this asham as an oila, that would be fine, right? Says the Gemara, no. Gzeira la'achar kapara atu lifnei kapara. There is a gzeira after kapara, atu lifnei kapara. What's the gzeira? Is that this only defaults to an oila after you've achieved the kapara with another korban. Meaning you brought another asham, and now this asham doesn't have anything left. So now this is going to default to an oila. But and you put out to grace and you say we're gonna take that money and we're gonna use it as a korban oila later on, etc. But there's exeriment the Rabbanan not to do that, meaning not to immediately default it to an oila. You have to put it out to grace. Why? Because we're concerned that gzera la'achar kapara, atu lifnei kapara, then people are going to think you can just switch any asham to an oila whenever you want. Says the Gemara, Uminai Tebra, where do you know to say such a thing, that there is such a gzera? Ditran, we have a Mishnah. Asham Shemesu, Balov. You have an Asham, Shemesu Balov. Its owner's died. Osham is Kapar Balov. All the Balov got their kapara from another korban. Yira Achi Staiv, it should roam until it develops a mum. V'macher, and it should be sold. V'if l'dava, and its money should be used as a nedava. Meaning, once it develops a mum, sell it off. Right? You pay the extra fifth, and then you'll be able to use that money. This animal is not chulin, and you'll be able to use the money now as a nedava, as a donation. Meaning this olas nedava. Rabbi Eliezer holds Yomus that it should die. That you cannot use this animal for anything. It should roam free until it dies. Rabbi Yeshua says, "Yimacher, it should be sold. V'yavim b'dam of oila, and you can bring an oila with its money. B'dam of in, that seems to be with its money you can bring a korban. Aval guf alai, but don't bring it as a korban. The gazal acha kapara atu lifnei kapara, because we are concerned about after kapara as before kapara. Meaning, if you wouldn't say to use the money, you would think that it could default automatically, which Meikara did, it does. But the Chachamim came along and said, no, we're going to tell you that you have to make a graze so that you don't think that any asham you can automatically use as an oila. And that's the gzera, the gazar la'acha kapara atu lifnei kapara shema mina, and this proves that such a din exists. We will continue with Ezevei Rav Chisda tomorrow. Everybody should have a wonderful day, and looking forward to finishing off the parak with you tomorrow.